Up next, we head over and focus on the markets, the cattle markets in particular this week. Joining the broadcast is Oklahoma State livestock analyst Darrell as we break down both the cattle on feed and July cattle inventory report, which were both released about a week ago. Well, based on the latest USDA report, the biennial report that comes out, we've got the data that shows the U.S. cattle herd is now the smallest in history since USDA began tracking that. How important of a milestone is this for the cattle industry based on that inventory report?
Well, you know, the main thing is that it continues what we've been seeing develop here. The January report showed that. We were still at a low, cyclical low. This July report, of course, the July report only goes back to about 1973, and it is the smallest inventory of both beef cows and beef replacement heifers. So, if you look at it, it certainly says that nothing has really changed here. We apparently are not in the process of rebuilding, at least not very much at this point. So we're going to continue to see the conditions that we've been following develop even further as we go on.
Let's talk about the cattle on feed report. It also came out at the same time essentially as the cattle inventory report. Did anything jump out to you? I know a lot of eyes were on the inventory report, but based on that cattle on feed, what did that tell you, Darrell?
Well, a couple things. You know, the monthly cattle on feed placements were down about 8%. That was more than expected, so a little bit of a surprise there. Positively for the industry, marketings were about as expected, but the on feed total then comes in a little bit smaller than expected. It was down about 1.6%. So, you know, for the last 8 consecutive months, this makes the 8th consecutive month that we've seen the cattle inventory decline. So, you know, we've been sort of looking for this, at least I have, for up to a couple of years, and it's finally with us now, where I think the reality of tight feeder cattle supplies out in the country is showing up with these reduced feedlot supplies.
All right, Darrell, let's spend a couple of minutes here talking about heifer retention. That's where a lot of people are asking questions right now. I've got 2 questions on that topic for you. One, what's the data tell you about possible herd rebuilding? And part 2 of that question is, what's the boots on the ground report? What do you hear from cattle producers when you bring up herd rebuilding?
Yeah, so, you know, the first one, you know, again, in these 2 reports, for the cattle on feed report, we were looking at the July quarterly breakdown of steers and heifers in the feedlots. It dropped some in April, the last quarterly report, so we were looking to see if it would drop further. It actually ticked back slightly higher. So the cattle on feed side of it says that about 38% of all the feedlot inventories are still heifers. The cattle inventory report gives us a direct estimate of those beef replacement heifers, and that number was, as we said earlier, the smallest in the history of that report. If you look at the heifers as a percentage of the beef cow herd, it's at the lowest level also in that report. So all of these taken together would again say, from a data standpoint, we can't confirm any heifer retention at this point. Now, if you talk to producers out in the country, you know, there's a lot of interest in it. I think a lot of people are asking questions, but I think, you know, it appears that it's still pretty cautious. And I think when you put it all together, the data as well as what I hear out in the country, I would say that we're moving very slow. If there's any heifer retention, it's at a fairly minimal level and moving very cautiously at this point.
Darrell, back on cattle on feed, interested in the placement numbers and the state-by-state breakdown, particularly in Texas, perhaps parts of Oklahoma as well, and the impact of the Mexican border being shut down. Are you seeing a pretty dramatic impact on the cattle on feed numbers, particularly, I guess, in the state of Texas because of the border shutdown?
Well, that's certainly one of the factors. I mean, we know feeder cattle supplies are tight, and obviously the fact that the border's closed means that we're not getting those Mexican cattle. It's obviously the biggest impact on those feedlots in that region that rely on those supplies. They're really scrambling to find alternative sources of cattle, but it is having some impact nationally as well. It contributes to that tight supply. Out of the mid-year cattle inventory report, we estimate the feeder supply that's not already in the feedlots, and that number was also the lowest that we can calculate for that report. So all of the numbers across the board with this, even with or especially with this border issue added in, confirm that we have extremely tight cattle supplies at this point.
Well, at this point, feedlots have all the leverage compared to the packers. We've got cheap feed out there, and especially on the cash side, as we see that develop, usually toward the later part of the week. It's the feedlots that have the cards in their hands that they can play. How long do you anticipate this could last? I suppose that's the million-dollar question.
Well, it really is a $1 million question, but if you take the big picture that we've talked about, and the fact that, when we do start retaining heifers to rebuild the herd, that means that we're going to pull those heifers out of that feedlot supply. So a couple of things are going to happen. We're going to tighten up supplies and beef production even more. Beef production is falling. It started falling more sharply in the second quarter of the year. It's going to continue to fall even more so when we start some heifer retention. Feedlots do have the upper hand right now, although they're going to be challenged a lot with supplies of cattle going forward. Feed cost is a real advantage for them right now, but as time goes on, the supply of feeder cattle available, and obviously the cost of those feeder cattle is going to be a challenge for feedlots. So they're going to have plenty of issues, but they do hold the cards relative to the packers right now.
As part of this historic run in the cattle market, Darrell, people like me on this side of the desk continue to ask, how's demand? How long will the consumer be willing to pay the price for beef right now? And while we have indications out there, it doesn't seem like the consumer, while there may be some other signs that consumer sentiment is weakening, when it comes to their purchase of beef, we're not seeing a weakening of demand. Does that continue to surprise you, or is it just me, Darrell?
Well, yeah, I think it's maybe a little bit of a surprise, although, we've been monitoring demand really ever since the pandemic, and we've not seen any signs of weakness through that entire process. Beef demand has been remarkably robust. We know there's lots of alternative proteins out there that consumers could turn to, but we're not seeing it. So obviously the preferences are very strong for beef, and there's nothing that would indicate that's going to change. As long as we don't have any major macroeconomic issues that would affect consumers from the standpoint of their ability, if you will, to continue to purchase, then I don't see any demand problems there as we go forward. It looks like, and as beef production continues to tighten up, that's going to limit the supply. So, some people won't be eating as much beef because there's not going to be as much beef, but that probably means that prices are going to go even higher as we ration a tighter supply going forward.